Okay, so today we're going to look at making custom PSU cable sleeves for your typical ATX or SFX power supplies. The things you'll need, you're going to need some heat shrink, some ratchet wire crimpers. I got mine from NDPCX, but you can get yours from Amazon. As long as they're ratchet crimpers, you should be fine. You need a pair of wire strippers. You need a pair of wire snips. 17 gauge wire. Now 18 gauge is the standard, but 17 is a personal preference. I got mine from, again, MDPCX. You're also going to need cable sleeving. Now this is definitely a part of the personal preference. You can use paracord if you're just learning. It's super cheap. It is a steeper learning curve, but once you learn how to sleeve using paracord, using braided sleeving is going to be so much easier. And with braided sleeving, they give you a lot more vibrant color options, and you can check those out on MDPCX or Titan Rig if you're in the US. You're also going to need ATX female crimp terminals. Now, all of your typical modular cables, they have female terminals inside of them, and these connectors are for full-length cables to replace the stock cables that come with the modular power supplies. You're also going to need a lighter, an X-Acto knife, and the power supply pinout. This is for your individual power supply, so whether it's Corsair, EVGA, Seasonic, doesn't matter. You need to find out what the pinout is for your power supply unit, otherwise you could really cause damage, so make sure that you get that. Also, you're going to need PSU connectors. An extra, but not necessarily required, I would get a Molex pin removal tool. It'll make fixing some mistakes a lot easier should you end up doing it, but if you follow this guide, you should be good to go. To make single wires, what you want to do is measure out your cable lengths. You want to strip the wire to about 4 millimeters. And then you want to crimp the connectors onto the wire. Measure out your paracord sleeving length to the length of the wire and then cut it. I usually try to stay about 5 millimeters short of the wire's actual length just to account for material stretch. What you want to do is remove the interior cords from the paracord. Next, you want to thread the wire through the sleeving. Cut a piece of heat shrink about 25 millimeters long. So you want to slide that heat shrink over what you just cut and make sure that the sleeving covers over the connector just a little bit. Use a lighter to melt the sleeving underneath on both ends. Now you want to rotate the sleeving so that it heats evenly. I don't have like a specific time that I use, but generally for paracord, once the sleeving starts to bubble, I usually stop and let it cool. Once it's cool, you can cut the heat shrink with wire snips. Most times in modular power supplies, they usually come with double wires. Check your pinouts to check which wires are double wires. To make a double wire, you repeat the single wire steps from 1 and 2. And you're going to cut a second wire to about 100 millimeters in length. You're going to measure 60 millimeters from one end of the wire, and you're going to mark it with a pencil on both of the wires that you cut. Now, I measure about 10 millimeters from the first mark and make a second mark on both wires. I cut the second wire on the topmost mark, and I strip the wire down to 10 millimeters. On the first wire, I take an X-Acto knife to strip the marked 10 millimeter section. Now when you're doing this, you want to make sure you slowly rotate the wire. You don't need to cut into the wire or press it. Simply the sharpness of the X-Acto knife will do the work for you. If you press into the wire, you will strip you will cut the wire, and that'll be a bad time because you're gonna have to start over. But if you rotate it, it'll make enough separation so you can remove the casing. Take your X-Acto knife between the wires and carefully rotate to make a 3mm space between them. Take the exposed second wire and insert it into the space created in the first wire. Wrap the second wire into the first. For this step, I've seen a lot of people do it different ways, but I don't really feel comfortable soldering, and it could end up being a terrible mess. So what I do is I take the wings from a spare connector and I crimp them around the new connection. So just like you would crimp around the original wire, you just bend it in half and you take the bottom half with the big wings and you crimp them around that new part that you just created. Now, if you're capable, soldering will create a really good bond, but crimping should be strong enough. Measure out new sleeving on the double wire to the bottom of the wire split. Stretch the sleeving onto the double connection and apply super glue to secure it in place. Cut the sleeving to fit 2 split wires up the connection. Cut a 25mm heat shrink and slide it over the split connection. Same rule goes with applying a heat shrink on the first two. You want to apply the heat evenly on the connection until the split wire sleeving is secured. Coming to the final step, inserting the wires into the connectors. Find the corresponding pinout guide for your power supply unit. You want to make sure that the wings are facing upwards towards the connector. Now, make sure the exterior wings are out. These are what clip inside of the power supply and prevent you from pulling it out. You want to follow the diagram and push the corresponding wires into the connectors until you either hear a click or the wire doesn't come out. Now, if a mistake is made, use the removal tool and insert to the top of the connector to release the side wings and remove the cables. Test your wires and make sure that they're working properly. Troubleshoot any issues. And if you're using cable combs, insert them after sleeving and before inserting them into the connectors. When you first start out, custom cables are pretty time consuming, but the more you practice, the better you get, and they are a fun and easy way to add a nice pop of personality into any of your builds. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Consider subscribing, leaving a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.